Hi, my name is Veronica. I currently reside in Rochester, Minnesota. Before I get to the topic of this video, I'm going to tell you a little bit about my background. I grew up in Northeast Iowa. After I graduated from high school in 1996, I went to Ellsworth Community College and I majored in criminal justice. From there, I went to the University of Iowa, which didn't really work out. Going growing up in a small town and then going to a small community college and then ending up at the University of Iowa was a little bit of culture shock for me. So I didn't finish and went on to do a lot of a couple different jobs in my 20s, and then I went back to the University of Iowa when I was 32, and I graduated when I was 35. And after I graduated, it was hard finding work, and I eventually moved back in with my parents, and I was there for about 10 months up in northern Minnesota, where they had lived since after I had graduated from high school, and it was hard living up there. I'd lived up there previously, and we were outsiders, so it was hard for me to make friends. Plus, I have a mild case of cerebral palsy, which always adds a certain level of difficulty to anything. But after 10 months, I was able to move back to Iowa City, and I had a couple jobs throughout the next 8 years. I worked with kids in before and after school programming, as well as in the school system, and then I also worked at a grocery store. But during those 10 months that I was back home with my parents, I did apply for Social Security disability, and I did get it. And the Social Security disability helped me survive for the next 8 years, because it was hard for me to find a job that I could do. Um, I can't type. I chicken peck, and every time that I've gone to a job and I've taken a typing test, I've always failed. And it seems like in this day and age, if you can't type, you know, that really hurts. You know, as far as looking for jobs. Um, I also have some lower vision. I can still drive. I can still drive, 100 miles an hour. Not that I do or anything, but, I still drive at night. I have a non restricted driver's license, except, it requires that I wear glasses, of course. Um, but yeah, so Social Security was great, but, the downside of Social Security, I don't know if it was a downside for me that, it helps, but it left me a lot of free time. Free time for me to sit at home and feel feel bad for some things in my life, like um, you know, not having the friend networks that I wish that I had. Sometimes I call myself that out of sight, out of mind kind of friend. That You know, it takes me to call somebody, you know. Um, but so so because of this, because of I'll go ahead and say it because it's a mental health crisis right now in the country. I had a lot of loneliness, and because I wasn't working full time, that loneliness would often get the best of me. And when I did find a friend, you know, a new friend, I could be a bit overwhelming, and ultimately, my loneliness would overwhelm that person and push them away. So in 2022, I was looking for work again, and I got a job at the Mayo Clinic, and I chose to apply at the Mayo Clinic because it was halfway between my hometown and the Twin Cities, where my parents had a house and my mom had been living to help my niece um, during the pandemic because she was starting kindergarten. So it was just an ideal place. I'd be closer to my mom, I'd be closer to some old high school friends back home. It was great. So, for one of the first times in my life, I was starting fresh, starting over again, moving somewhere where I didn't know a single person. And so I got a job as a patient transporter at St. Mary's Hospital at the Mayo Clinic. And what I would do was move patients around the hospital from their from their room to procedures, X-ray, CAT scan, that type of thing. I'd admit patients from the ED to a bed, take patients to other procedures like dialysis, cath lab, that kind of thing. And it was a wonderful job for somebody like me because I wasn't just sitting around. I was walking a lot, a lot. Um, I would walk anywhere from 13,000 to 20,000 steps a day. It was great. It was quite a culture shock because for the first time in a long time, I was I was doing something full time. So, I while I did miss the freedom that I had while on Social Security, I didn't miss the downtime. I was busy. Um, I still had some hobbies, so my free time, not at work, I was either with my dog, my German Shepherd Lena, who's really the love of my life, or I was working on. I'm an adult fan of Legos. I just love Legos. It's sometimes a three-dimensional puzzle. It's what it's like looking for pieces. So I do a lot of that. I also like to bake, and about a year ago, I bought a pretty nice 3D printer, and I was 3D printing a lot of things, and I would 3D print a lot of things for people at the hospital just for fun. The my some of the colleagues that I had in X-ray liked it when I printed off bones for them so they could have them in their break room and so forth. But because I was so busy, my mental health, went probably from like, I don't know, maybe a 4 or 5 to a 10 because I didn't have that time just sitting around, bored out of my mind, looking at the phone, hoping that somebody would call me and say, "Hey, Veronica, let's go do something," because that just doesn't happen that much to me. So, working at Mayo was wonderful, for me. It gave me a purpose because I really felt also like I was making a difference. People would come into the hospital, scared, you know, maybe they'd had a stroke, maybe they were in an accident, maybe just all kinds of things. And I was there to comfort them, to distract them as I pushed them through the hospital to wherever I was taking them. So, about a year into my employment at Mayo, I I got a new manager. He had just started at Mayo, and he came from a completely different industry than from healthcare. And it was clear to see that it seemed that he did not like me because every little misstep that anybody else would not think anything of, he would call me out on it. And every time he called me out, he would say, "Oh, Veronica, you're just a troublemaker." And I've been called trouble my whole life. So you go in somewhere and somebody's like, "Oh, here comes trouble," and it's like it wasn't that kind of thing. It was like, you're a troublemaker, and if you don't shape up, you're gonna get fired. That kind of thing. And eventually, that's what happened. But in the meantime, I had talked to human resources, and they did nothing. I had talked to my department chair, and she didn't really do anything. I had gone to compliance and integrity. All they did was forward my complaint to human resources, who again did nothing. Nobody was looking out for me. And, unlike other times in my life, other jobs where, I probably, didn't handle things the right way. I handled things the way that I was supposed to at the Mayo Clinic. And the worst thing I did at the Mayo Clinic was I forcefully tossed my mug on the break room floor after a coworker kept um, talking over, interrupting me and talking over me when I was trying to talk. And I did that because I was frustrated. I wanted to kind of break the pattern because he kept talking over me, and it's something that I regret. I was honest about, and I got in trouble for that. They said it was a violent and threatening behavior, which, like, okay, maybe, but I don't know, maybe a little excessive. But you know, as far as my job duties, I never did anything wrong, and I had a wonderful 1 year review that I was outstanding in every category. My manager would find little things that I had done in the break room that he would get all bent out of shape over. What in the last couple years there was a nurse at Yale in Connecticut that was stealing pain meds and giving patients water. I never did anything like that. in Iowa, there's been situations where a staff member at a care facility, you know, got somebody pregnant. I never did anything like that. I did my job 100%. And, I get this new supervisor that, looked at everything outside of my job duties as wrong. And, I've told people that, what had happened to me, and they're like, oh, yeah, I hate it when, boss comes in and, doesn't like somebody. And it's like, that shouldn't be a norm. It shouldn't be something like, oh, yeah, I hate it when that happens. Like, what is wrong with our society that, that becomes so commonplace that it seems like everybody knows somebody that it's happened to? For some people, getting terminated from a job is life changing. I'm a single person. It's expensive to be single in the United States. I pay $1,400 for a like a less than 800 square foot apartment. I have friends whose their mortgage is less than that. And I loved working at the Mayo Clinic. I miss my family that I had there. I knew so many people. Everybody in the hospital knew me. Unfortunately, I'm one of those people that you don't forget because, the way people see the way that I walk. I often tell people it's why I couldn't pursue a life of crime, because it'd be too easy to pick me out of a lineup. But, Mayo Clinic was the first place that, I really felt welcomed. So losing that job, was just awful. And I appealed twice, and they're like, yep, no, we're not going to do anything. I had an interview at with a recruiter at the University of Wisconsin in late January, and I told her that my opinion was of Mayo was that you can't be the best at everything. So you can be the best hospital, they're the best hospital in the country. But while you're focused on one thing, other things do fall through the cracks, and I'm living proof of that, because I went to human resources and nobody really did anything. Nobody was there to protect me like Mayo would say they protect patients and take care of patients. So after 4 months of applying at the University of Wisconsin, about 10 days ago, I received a job offer, and I was really excited. Here I'm going to do the same thing I was doing at Mayo, patient transport. Something that I loved, something that, I felt like I was making a difference. Until I realized how expensive Madison, Wisconsin is, and how, the end of May, beginning of June is not really the right time to be looking for a place in a big college town. And to get an equivalent apartment to the one that I have now, I'm looking at $1,800. And, the other thing about going from Mayo Clinic, a private hospital, to the University of Wisconsin, a public hospital, is that I'm going to be earning more than $500 less than I did at Mayo. Plus, there's going to be a lot other expenses. I know from the University of Iowa that, universities, the nature of funding and so forth, they'll nickel and dime people the best they can. And, on top of my $500 less in wages, I'm going to have to pay for parking. I'm going to have a whole lot of other stuff that I have to pay for. And I have so much empathy for, people that make minimum wage in this country. It's just awful. How can people survive? I mean, we all should be making, 30, 40, $50 an hour. That's the only way that you can survive in this country with the way housing prices are. But you know that if we made that much money, housing prices would be double or triple what they are right now. But so here I am, been unemployed for 7 months. Luckily, I had 6 months of unemployment, but so I get offered the job at Madison, and tomorrow, Monday, I'm going to notify Wisconsin that I can't afford to move to Madison. Rent is just way too high. So I'm going to be moving back with my mom for the third time in my life. I'm 46 and I'm moving back with my mom because, I haven't been able to find something in Rochester or anywhere else right now that will help me afford to live independently, because housing is so expensive. Wages are so low. It's just, it's just horrible. And you can, some people will blame it on this from the government, or on this or on this. And I mean, I think we're all to blame. If somebody really wanted to pay the wages, a fair wage, they could, but people don't. And so I have to decide what I'm going to do. If I'm unable to find something in the Twin Cities, maybe I will have to go back on Social Security disability. And it's not something that I want to do. I want to be a productive member of the workforce. If I'm on Social Security, I'm not really paying into Social Security, and that's going to be bankrupt in 2035, 10 years from now. I'd rather be doing my part and contributing to Social Security rather than sitting at home taking in Social Security disability. So I guess what I want from this video is, I'm hoping that this will reach somebody who has some influence to get me my job back at Mayo. Despite everything with my former boss, I would go back to Mayo in a heartbeat. I want to feel productive. I want to feel like I'm making a difference in somebody else's life. I want to be so busy that I don't have time to dwell on the things that, aren't perfect in my life. You know. And I'll admit, I'm not a perfect person. None of us are. I've made my mistakes. I've paid for them. But I'm a good person. And, I deserve to find my little piece of, happiness. Even if it's not owning a great big house, or something like that. I still, I've got a lot of good years left in me, and I want to be doing something that I love. So, if you see this and you're like, hey, I want to help her, but you don't know somebody who has that influence. If you look up if you go on to Google and you look up the administration at Mayo Clinic, the board of trustees, and you wanna email the chief administrative officer. She has 3 syllables in her first name and 1 syllable in her last name. And her email address would be the last name dot first name at mayo.edu. That would help. Maybe if enough people, wrote to her, maybe they give me my job back. I don't know. I don't want financial donations. I don't need that. I just want to be working again. But if you have another way to change, vote in November. Vote for whoever you think is going to help people like me, to help those people that have to work 3 jobs to make ends meet. I just don't have that energy to do that. I want one good job so that I can have health benefits. But there's a lot of people like me out here. It's expensive to be an American, to be anyone, I guess. But, like I said, if you can help, that's the email. Thank you so much.